Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Places She Shapes live at WSP. Woo! You are being recorded. Please make noise. I'm Zoe Smeeth. I'm a business owner, a project manager, and the host of Places She Shapes. Places She Shapes was born out of a desire to hear more stories from inspiring women. Throughout my career, I've predominantly worked for men, so the leadership examples and advice I've had have mainly been from a male perspective. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, it dawned on me that to inspire others, we need to hear more balanced stories. And guess what? It turns out the stories from a female perspective are way more interesting. They're rarely neat, they're rarely linear, they're full of pivots, pauses, and plot twists. Over 2 seasons, we've talked about the moments that don't always make it onto a CV. We've talked about heartache and bereavement, abusive relationships, misogyny and the slow burn of being underestimated, maternity leave and walking away from a business, mansplaining, sexism, a late ADHD diagnosis, the fallout of COVID, death threats, starting businesses, closing businesses, building businesses, and that stubborn desire to go it alone. And sometimes not even being allowed in the room. Hands up if you've experienced one or more of these. Amazing. And here's what I've learned so far. There's often a hesitancy around the word leadership, but there is no shortage of ambition. So tonight, I've gathered some of my amazing guests from season 1 and season 2, and we're going to dig even deeper into the moments that quietly shape how we lead, how we show up, and how we keep smashing it. My colleague Josh is here with a mic for audience questions, so if something resonates or challenges you, be ready. My hope for tonight is simple. I want you to leave feeling inspired, maybe even excited about the future, or if nothing else, quietly relieved to realise it's not just you. Because in industries like ours, it's easy to believe leadership is linear, confidence is constant, and success is something you arrive at fully formed, but it isn't. Leadership is shaped in the unseen moments, before the title, before the promotion, and before the recognition. And when we are brave enough to share those stories, we don't just entertain, we inspire. But before we go to my podcast guests, we have a special opening speech from Laura Collins. I'm delighted to introduce Laura, Senior Development Director at Stanhope, joining us tonight on her last engagement before heading off to have her second baby. Laura is a quantity surveyor by background, and her story is fascinating. Please join me in giving Laura a massive welcome.
Thanks, Zoe. And I'm actually due on Saturday, so it's my last fleeting visit until I leave for a little while. Good evening, everybody. And Zoe, thank you so much for having me tonight. I did say yes within 30 seconds of receiving the email, and then I remembered that I was going to be 40 weeks pregnant. So if this does turn into a live episode of One Born Every Minute, just remember this was your booking strategy. So where to begin? So I've been in the industry for 20 years, scarily enough, this September. And I started not far down the road in High Holborn at 18 with absolutely no idea what a quantity surveyor was, let alone an MEP quantity surveyor. So this happened because my mum randomly got chatting to a recruitment agent on a plane. And that one conversation at 30,000 feet, my direction changed for a long time of my life ahead. But my training actually started a bit earlier than that. At 13, after racking a £400 phone bill when those text messages cost 50p a go, my dad sent me to work in his garage. And I was surrounded by male mechanics, and I negotiated with customers who never ever want to spend money on their cars. So you learn very, very quickly about how to hold your ground. and how to explain value and how not to be intimidated. And that first decade was very technical and very tough. I specialised in MEP, the invisible engineering that makes buildings function. It taught me detail, it taught me discipline, and it taught me how to defend a number under pressure. And by the time I got to 21, clients asked to deal with me directly because I knew the detail of their project better than anyone else in the room. In that time, I became one of the world's youngest chartered surveyors in the world at Davis Langdon. I was then promoted at Mace as associate director, their youngest in the business at the time. And I was also incredibly proud because I was 6 months pregnant as well. I won awards at RLB and I collected titles. And I owned that space. And at some point, I was called the Rottweiler of the industry. And I wore it really proudly. But here's what I would say to anyone early in their career, male or female. You don't need to shrink to succeed. You don't need permission to take up space. Competence builds confidence, and consistency builds credibility. Your voice matters earlier than what you think. So the second decade. In 2016, my world turned upside down. My daughter arrived, and by complete and utter coincidence, my nephew also arrived 15 minutes later. Twin cousins with their whole lives ahead of them. And at first, everything was fine. Molly was developing. No one was worried. And then came the questions. Appointments, referrals, and hospital corridors. It took 4 years and 2 days just before she started primary school, and that diagnosis landed. Those years were very uncertain for me, advocating without a label, trusting instinct without proof. And it took me a very long time to say that she has got a disability, but she reshaped me. She taught me patience beyond boardrooms. She taught me advocacy. She taught me to challenge systems instead of accepting them. And she made me braver. Because when you fight for your child, you lose tolerance for small thinking in life and in business. And then in 2019, Stanhope called. Stanhope, the Premier League of developers. I made the leap from consultant to developer, and on day one, I felt 18 all over again. And I have no clue what I was doing again, but I promised that I wouldn't let anyone down. And growth feels like that sometimes. I quickly learned to think like an owner, to see risk differently, to take space again. And around that same time, my personal life shifted. I made the really difficult decision to end my marriage. Shortly after, COVID arrived. Life compressed. I moved back with my parents, who thought they'd launched me and got rid of me, and only to help raise me up all over again. But they didn't hesitate. They steadied me. They supported my daughter. They gave me space to rebuild. And work very, very quickly became my safe place. It was structured, logical, and deliverable. When everything else felt really uncertain, work was that solid place. There were moments of doubt, moments of exhaustion, but adversity didn't break me. It clarified me. And I didn't do it alone. My parents, my friends, my mentors across 2 decades, my boss, colleagues, and our brilliant CEO who trusted me with responsibility, not sympathy. Resilience is never built solo. So, taking a bit of a different direction, I did what any other senior professional would do in this industry, and I asked ChatGPT to summarise my career. And apparently, and I can't say half of this stuff, but I am a pioneering authority. I'm commercially astute, strategist, a visionary leader, a boardroom force with sector-shaping influence. At one point, I did think I sounded less like a developer and more like a Marvel character in a hard hat. It was polished, it was impressive, it was algorithm-approved brilliance. But if LinkedIn could hand out Oscars, I'd need a bigger mantelpiece than I've already got. But that's the Instagram moment. So the reality is just a bit steadier. It's about making hard decisions and still showing up. It's learning that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. And somewhere in the rebuilding, I met someone who quietly did show up for me. And after building independence like armour, it was really uncomfortable to let someone help. But he showed me that partnership isn't weakness, it's stability. And for that, I'm deeply grateful. So, moving forward, not just upwards, outwards. Mentoring younger professionals, women and men who feel unsure whether they deserve a seat at the table, backing talent before they fully believe in themselves. And in my spare time, I'm a girl guiding leader with the Brownie unit, girls between 7 and 10, helping them lead, speak up and trust their voice before the world teaches them not to. Because if we do build confidence early, we don't spend decades repairing it later. And that's the work that matters. So the buildings are important, the deals are important, the titles are impressive, but the real work, the lasting work, is building a life that can withstand storms. And as this next decade begins for me, as a family of 4, I won't just be proud of what I've constructed in London and the UK, I'll be proud of the foundations I've laid. Because when everything else shifts, knowing who you are is the strongest structure you'll ever build. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good luck. Thank you. Thank you to Laura. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to introduce my first 2 guests. Our very kind hosts this evening, Claire Gott from WSP and Diana Pego from Area. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Get to ask you questions all over again. I'm very excited. Claire, I'm going to start with you. You've said that saying yes to a school trip in Tanzania was your sliding door moment that led to co-founding a charity in Cameroon and at 25 receiving an MBE from King Charles. What was it about building something that lasts that turned a student's passion into a career and a 15-year engine for providing clinics, schools and clean water?
So I think when we first started out, it was really about how we could make very small, tangible differences to people's quality of life. You know, building a small hand pump, manual pump, hand dug well for £6,000 would give clean drinking water to 200 people. But the bit that sparked us on and really kept us going was because of the indirect impact, the catalyst for change. The locals in Cameroon were seeing female engineers coming over from the UK and leading the delivery of these projects at the age of 19, 20, 21. And that sparked something in them, that inspired them, and they started delivering their own projects, setting up their own women's groups, empowering change within their own communities. So for us, that was seeing that ripple effect was really what kept us going.
Amazing. As UK Head of Structures at WSP, you lead 500 people and swear by listening, right down to your WSP Listen survey. If you had to hand a new leader a 90-day plan for a people-led culture, what are the first 3 moves and how do you measure whether they're actually working?
So in the last 10 years, I've moved into a new leadership role in WSP 4 times. So I've done this 4 times over, and I've always been tasked with WSP aspire to be an undisputed people leader. So really that's about recognising that our projects are only successful as the people behind them and the relationships that they share with our clients and our partners. And I'm really passionate about driving an empowered team of people who want to bring their best selves to work and have a psychologically safe working environment to thrive. So I would always say, starting with the active listening piece, really get to know your team. Don't go from assumptions or hearsay. Go and see your team. I've got 16 offices across the UK. I go and see them all twice a year. I think then the second thing is, really understanding that everybody is unique and individual, and the support that you need to give to your people will be different depending on who they are and what makes them, what motivates them and gets them going. And then I think the third thing is really responding to that feedback, whether it's from the WSP Listen survey or if it's from one-to-ones directly, informally, with integrity to build trusting relationships. Do what you say you're going to do, I actually went to the launch of Jimmy Wales, the Wikipedia co-founder, his book on the 7 rules of trust. And I highly recommend it because that is absolutely at the core of all of our relationships with our people.
Yes. You've been candid about grief, losing your first child and returning to work too soon. You've later supported bereaved parents while also welcoming your son via surrogacy. What does a genuinely compassionate policy look like for teams navigating loss, and how can leaders spot when someone needs a quiet pivot rather than a resilience talk?
So I think the thing to remember is that we either all have or will experience loss, whether it's a family member, a child, in my case, parents, grandparents. And so whilst there's a taboo in society around loss, it's really important to recognise that actually there's real connection around that as well. Again, understanding that everybody approaches grief differently. Everybody needs different things when they're grieving. Certainly I went back to work 5 weeks after giving birth. I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but I needed people to understand what was right for me. And so I think the important thing, again, is reaching out, is understanding what that person needs, and also sitting with them in the discomfort sometimes is really powerful, and going at their pace. From my experiences, I was able to help shape WSP's bereavement and fertility policy. And the main driver behind that was a no questions asked approach. If someone loses someone, they get the time off. And they don't have to explain or justify or ask for that. They just get that time.
Recently, you turned down an opportunity choosing depth over speed to protect family balance. If we want gender parity higher up the ladder faster, what infrastructure would move the needle in the next 2 years, and what would you ask the industry to commit to publicly?
I guess I want to preface that by saying it was a really difficult decision.
Yeah.
And it's probably the first time in my life that I've recognised that it's a juggling act. And I was brought up being told, you can have it all. And I think the reality actually is that, and I am going to talk specifically about women for a moment, that we are able to have it all, but we are still expected to do everything that we used to do in society many, many years ago. And so we are typically the caregivers alongside everything else. And I think whilst we're probably not as challenged as you found it, Diana, in America, in terms of that care support, if we could look to other parts of Europe, Scandi, for example, and the support they provide in terms of childcare, paternity leave, really learn some lessons from what they've already done in terms of putting the children first, not just the parents, but actually enabling parents to have time with their children to grow the foundations for our children. I think that's hugely important. And I think the other thing I think is becoming more and more evident and important is the mentoring and coaching circles that we're seeing in industry and the impact they're having. And you and I are both part of the Circle partnership. And if we could see more of those, connecting women, supporting women from male allies as well, I think that could be really powerful.
Yeah. Diana, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that you have to have people that advocate and speak up. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Claire, you failed your chartership the first time round, but later became a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and somewhere in the middle helped set a Guinness World Record in Lego bridge building. How do you coach early career engineers to use failure as fuel?
I love this question. I was absolutely devastated. I was terrified of what people would think of me, my perception at work, within the industry. But what it did do was actually give me a bit of a steer into a pivot in my career and recognising that technical isn't where my strengths are. I'm much more in terms of people and business leadership, and it really encouraged me to move down that route, probably more rapidly than if I hadn't failed. And we held our WSP conference a couple of weeks ago, and I did a session on innovation, and it was all about reframing failure into feedback, enabling us to innovate more, iterate faster, make smarter risks, and ultimately taking our people on that journey that it can really help unlock a different direction for them, and really drive a different approach. So,
Great, thank you. Diana, coming to you. So after years of persuading your parents and with your nan's backing, you left Brazil for the United States, aged just 16. What did courage look like for you then, and how does that same courage show up in your leadership today?
So I feel like Claire is a proper civil engineer. The courage for me at that time showed up as signing up for a 5-year civil engineering degree in the US. I think people sometimes don't appreciate how being a foreigner sucks. And, you don't get the jokes. You don't really get what's going on a little bit. You say things funny, and I think for me, 16, 18, it looked like just, signing up to being a foreigner somewhere new. And that was a massive thing. But I think courage kind of evolves with you. And I think, we all probably can agree that every day or every week, you have to kind of get the courage to say the right thing, or, have that really tough conversation with someone from your team, or, be able to be vulnerable with your partner. I think you have to find in yourself to be courageous. And I think it's something that we always have to get used to.
Yeah, and how do you apply it in your job every day now?
So I think in leadership, right, at least myself, I always come across hard conversations and have to tell myself to, just do it. And I think we're going to get to kind of talking about culture a little bit. But, if you want to go culture and if you want to get in with your team, have a good relationship or good relationships, you have to be able to have tough conversations and just have honesty, right? So I think for me anyway, it shows up in having that one-on-one that I don't really want to have because it's going to be awkward. Again, having just tough, tricky conversations that you might not want to have.
Yeah. So after being in the US, you chose the UK for culture and quality of life, taking a really big pay cut and pushing through multiple visa rejections. What did that time teach you about risk, value, and backing your own long-term vision?
I was nuts at the time, right? So for context, I was earning 71 grand in the US as a graduate. I signed up to be a project manager in an industry that I know nothing about. I didn't know what D&B was, when I signed up. But I guess if you are really passionate about something, just at the time I thought that was the only way that I could do things. And I guess I was so passionate about the vision that it was the only way that I saw. So I think kind of talking about risk, you kind of are aware of the risks, but you kind of take, you guys say the rough for the smooth. You know that you're going to have to ride the waves and have to go through the tough moments, with the kind of goal in mind. And I think that applies to many things. If you really, really want something in life, whatever that may be, you have to know that you're going to go through tough moments to, get to something special.
Yeah. So you've had to navigate a sexist environment. You've talked about resilience and speaking up. What are the most practical signals of a healthy culture, and what can leaders do tomorrow to make women feel genuinely safe and heard?
So for me, I think the signs of a healthy culture are actually pretty unglamorous. I think, it's not the fancy Christmas parties or going out with the team for drinks. I actually think it's about, can you have honest conversations? Do you call people out when you hear something that is slightly wrong or slightly inappropriate? In a boardroom, if someone is interrupted, do you can say, actually, I would love to have her finish or have him finish? I think it's more in the day-to-day as opposed to, the glamorous, let's go for a Christmas party, that's great.
Yeah. Claire, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's in the day-to-day connections, actually. Coming back to my earlier point around really getting to know people and understanding what drives them, what motivates them, and enabling that. And that's something we're really focused on at the moment, and I think it takes time. It takes a huge amount of time. I heard recently that it can take up to 4 years just to create, a shift in culture. So everyday connections, continuing that, yeah.
Absolutely. You once said that you never wanted to be in sales, yet you reframed it as advisory leadership. And you had a mentor who really listened to you. How do you lead with your own voice and not the industry template? And what did you learn about going from good to great in that transition?
Good question. I think one thing that I learned personally was that you can be authentic and that you can be authentically yourself. And obviously that means different things for different people, right? But for me, in leadership, in D&B, in construction, it meant that I didn't actually necessarily have to be what I was kind of pigeonholed into and what people thought was the right thing to be. And, that you could actually have decent conversations with people and, get to know them, even if you didn't meet the agenda of the meeting, you're getting to know them and you're having that, kind of talking about the human connection. I think that counts for a lot, especially nowadays. We're humans, right? We crave human connection. So I think that's actually the biggest lesson that I had, is that you can be yourself and you can be successful. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a certain template.
Yeah, thank you. Becoming a mum shifted your boundaries a bit, didn't it? And you learned it's okay to let people down and become a schedule freak.
A little bit.
What are your best tips for protecting time, both for your team and for your family?
So I think for me, best tip is to be intentional about your time. So, we all have priorities, wherever that may be. It might be, a play for your kids and you have to be there. It might be a one-on-one with the team that you have to do, or it might be some, time with yourself to strategize and think about what you're going to do. And I guess the tip for me is make sure that you put the important things first in your diary, because or else the urgent things will always kind of creep up. And just don't apologize for that, and knowing that if you have to leave at 4 o'clock one day, that's fine, and make it known. I think also talking about leadership, if you see a leader do that, it kind of gives people the kind of freedom to do the same. We kind of create that culture.
Yeah. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome.
I wonder if there's any questions from the audience. Josh has got a microphone. Oh, no, he hasn't got a microphone. Nearly got a microphone. There was one at the back.
Hello. I wanted to ask, you've both got children. What is something in today's industry that you'd like to change that will impact your children later when they are in their working career?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, don't mind. So I actually talk about this a lot with my husband, because my son's only 3, but we're kind of concerned around what skill does he need? What skill set is he going to need in 20 years' time when he graduates or finishes his education? And actually, I just don't think we know yet. And so for me, it comes back to, and what we talk about a lot, is the human-centered engineering for us as structural engineers and wider engineers is definitely what we focus on. Even if AI really does, change the way we do things, there's still that need for the human-centered approach, the creative element, the curious element, the bit that we bring that makes us all different, and therefore will make our projects different. And so that's the bit that I'm, as a mum and also as a leader, trying to focus on, is that human-centered bit. I don't quite know what that looks like yet for my son in 20 years' time, but that bit, yeah.
It's a great answer. The same. My daughter is 2.5, so not dissimilar. And I don't know. We don't know, right, what it's going to be like. I think for my generation, maybe, my parents at least were like, no, you're going to be an engineer. And, it was very encouraged. But at this point in time, how do we know, what a career is going to look like in a few years? So I think I was speaking to someone at work recently, and his daughter is 11, and he's trying to advise her, what kind of subjects to take. And even that is hard, because you want to encourage them to be whatever they want to be, but equally knowing that, you want them to have a good career as well. But equally, none of us know what it's going to look like in 10 years. So yeah, it's tough. We just do, I guess, our best at the moment.
Yeah. Any other questions for Claire or Diana?
What advice would you give to someone looking for a career pivot?
Career pivot.
So that'd be a great question for you, Di.
I honestly, it sounds really cliche, but just follow your gut. I think you always know, passion, I think, is a word that kind of gets flown around a lot. But I think if you know inside you that you want to do something, I think just go for it, and without being philosophical, we have one life to live. And I think if you don't do that for yourself, then no one else is going to. And I actually think I realized that kind of later on in life. I followed a path where, I was going in maths, and I thought civil engineering made sense. But after 5 years, I was like, this is absolutely not for me. I want to talk to people, and it was a different path. But I think if I maybe had the courage at the time to follow my gut, it would have been a different story. So yeah, I think that's the advice I would give.
Thank you. Right, rapid fire time, guys. Hold on to your pants. Right, Claire, favourite tiny habit that makes a big difference?
Working out.
Diana, favourite thing you've stopped doing that improved your life?
Oh, favorite thing I stopped doing that improved my life? Eating chocolate, probably.
That's not improved your life. Come on.
I think it has.
Favourite compliment you've ever received at work?
Making someone's day, saying thank you and that being really appreciated. Yeah.
Favourite non-negotiable in your daily routine?
I think working out or going for a walk, something like that.
Okay. Favourite way to get unstuck when you're procrastinating?
Pick up the phone, talk to a friend, or go and see someone in the office. We've got so many amazing peers and colleagues and experts. For me, tapping into that is just, a huge benefit of being part of a big team.
Favourite piece of advice you ignored and later realised was right?
Again, cliche, follow your gut.
You listened to it too late?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you didn't.
Did.
Favourite risk you've taken that paid off?
I think when I moved out of technical engineering and realised that wasn't where my strengths were, and I picked up the phone to the guy that was leading the London Bridge Station redevelopment and said, "Can I come and work with you?" And I had no idea what I was heading into, and it was definitely the right move for me. Yeah.
Amazing. Favourite comfort show or comfort read when your brain is fried?
I actually go from different books. I'm reading Hamnet at the moment because it's a love story. So I think just going from, for me at least, is good information and things that you can assimilate, and then like a lovely pleasure read, if that's any good advice.
Last one. Favourite thing you do to mark the end of the workday?
Celebrate with my son when I can at home. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Please join me in giving Claire and Diana a massive round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Please keep your applause going, and please welcome my next two guests, Mitch and Amanda. Amanda's Soul is from Inside Source, Season 1, and Mitch Lloyd Jones from Ascent Flight Training from Season 2. Welcome. Thanks for being here, guys. So, Mitch, this morning you were flying around Wales.
I was.
Literally flying around Wales. How was the weather up over there?
The weather was awful. And,
it's been lovely here.
I was a bit worried I'd have to divert to London, but I'll see. Luckily, I managed to get the train, so I'm good.
Well done. Thank you. Mitch, I'm going to come to you first. I think we'd all like to know a little bit more about what it's like to be a fighter pilot. Can you tell me a bit about the types of speeds and G-force a fighter pilot experiences?
Yeah, so obviously at the moment I'm flying a sort of fairly slow aircraft, but when you're on the front line you could be flying at speeds that would be beyond the speed of sound. How that feels, actually, you don't really notice a lot of difference in speed, which is quite unusual. You might get some differences in the controls that you're feeling. But the big difference when you're going really fast is the fact that your thought processes need to be a lot further ahead. So when you're in your car and you're looking at traffic lights, for example, you might be responding to those because they're only a few meters ahead of you. Whereas I need to be thinking 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles ahead of myself. So when you're flying at high speeds, the time and the distance that you need to be thinking just needs to expand, but the processes are exactly the same. So that's sort of the differences in speed, really. So you could be flying really slow when you're when you're in the landing phase, but then you could be flying really fast when you're trying to intercept a different aircraft. But if you're going through the sound barrier, actually, you don't notice it. You don't know. So on the ground, you hear all these times where people are hearing these sonic booms and the windows are getting blown out or things. But yeah, when you're flying, you don't really notice that. It's just something that is happening outside of the aircraft.
Yeah.
So that sort of speed. When it comes to G, it's that force that you feel. If you're on a fun fair ride, you might feel it. But for me, when I'm in a turn and I'm pulling, then I'll feel that force through my body, and it's trying to push all the blood out of my head down into my feet.
Yeah.
So on a day-to-day basis, I could be sort of flying and pulling maybe 5G, so my body is weighing 5 times the amount that it would be flying, that it would be at the moment. But frontline aircraft generally about 9G, so your body's 9 times the amount.
So the first spark for you for becoming a pilot came from seeing the red arrows on Blue Peter and going to air shows with your dad. What drove you to follow this through to becoming a fighter pilot and now a fighter pilot instructor, training the best pilots in the world?
I think when I was probably 13 or 14, it was that sort of desire to want to do something I've just seen. So all those inspirational things that I'd seen on TV or in films that I'd seen. That's what I wanted to achieve. And it was like a stepping stone approach. And it's like nobody had ever said no to me. I couldn't do it. So that never really entered into my mind. So it was sort of thinking, well, what can I do to get to that next step? So it was like I said, that stepping stone of what was the first thing I can do? Well, I can get into the military. How do I get into the military? Once I'm in the military, I didn't get offered pilot to start with. So what could I do? Right, okay, well, I've now got a different job within the military. So what could I do to still try and achieve that job? So, and that continues each time as I was going through my career. And even when we're flying, we're being constantly assessed. It's that stepping stone of what can I do to try and succeed and trying to get where I want to go. That's sort of really what was sort of driving me. That idea of not actually being told no, really.
But when you were a teenager, they weren't, like, women weren't even allowed to fly, were they?
No, they weren't.
So it was a kind of unobtainable target.
But I never even thought that. It's like, well, why not me? Why can I not do that?
Yeah.
And I suppose I was just fortunate with the timing that by the time I did apply, the first few women were being accepted, but it never even entered into my mind. I suppose it was nice that there were people around me that goes, well, you can't do that. I never had that. There was no reason for me not to try.
Yeah. So with a slightly unconventional route into becoming a pilot, what did this teach you about perseverance, do you think?
Unless there's a really valid reason for being told no and not doing something, like maybe medical reason or something that is stopping you doing a particular job, then you should always try. If you've got a goal and a passion we were talking about earlier, then keep trying for that, because that's what happened for me. And I was trying to stay positive, that positive mindset of, well, okay, having a goal, that's the goal I want to achieve. How am I going to do that? So even though I got taken off to a different sidetrack and it's like, well, that's the goal I want, but no, you're not having that, you're going over here. It's like, well, okay, but I now need to try and find a way of getting back that way. So it was always trying to find a way of achieving what I wanted to do, what I desired. And that would be my advice on perseverance is don't accept the no unless there's a really, really valid reason, and just really try and strive for what you really want to achieve.
A senior once told you he didn't agree with women going to the front line and your confidence has taken some real hits. How did you rebuild belief after that, and what practical behaviours do you implement daily?
I don't think I did rebuild it straight after. It took years to rebuild. And I think, as leaders, I think I deal with trainees a lot. But, as in a leadership role, if you express your personal views that aren't necessarily the view that is the correct view, or you try and destroy somebody's confidence, that can impact people for absolutely years. And it really depends on the character also that you're talking to. A little bit of banter can actually be taken the wrong way as well, couldn't it? So for me, that took absolutely years to get over, not from that one individual, but obviously it's just like these little things, and it just builds up, doesn't it? So as those years went on and my knowledge and my confidence, my own abilities improved, that's when my confidence started to increase as well with it. And it wasn't really necessarily imposter syndrome, because obviously, that's something that a lot of people deal with as well. But when you are being told that, well, that wasn't good enough, or like, I'm trying to work really hard and I'm just about getting there, and then you get people say that, it just sort of knocks you back. So I think having that confidence, it sort of built as I became more sure of myself and increasing my knowledge, making sure I knew all the rules and regulations, so I knew what my boundaries were. And if I know what my boundaries are, then I can then have the confidence to go, well, actually, no, you're wrong. I know what my boundaries are, I know what my rules are, and I know how I should be performing. So that for me was a major thing that helped me increase my confidence, and it just took a long time, really. And that as well with some validation from other people. When you're being assessed all the time and you're working with people alongside you, when you are seeing that you're actually doing a good job, then I think that can help your confidence a lot. So,
How many women are now active fighter pilots?
One.
One.
Oh my God. At the moment, yeah. So there are. Don't get me wrong. There's women coming through the system at the moment.
We saw some in training.
So there's somebody. Yeah. So there's obviously girls coming through with us at the moment, and there's one on the F-35 Lightning OCU at the moment as well. We're just, as Wing Commander, that's just taken over in charge of the Red Arrows as well,
Yeah,
which is fantastic, but still a really small percentage,
What is preventing more?
So I find that a really interesting question, and I'd love to know, the actual answer. I mean, my views are there's so many different little filters that stop that happening. In an instructional world, you're recruiting from my generation or just after my generation, so you're naturally going to have a lower percentage of instructors that are going to be women, because that's the ratios that went through when I was there. But for today, you've got anthros, so anthropometrics, so i.e. your physical height and length. So in order to sit on an ejection seat, you've got to meet a certain weight and a certain reach to be able to reach things around the cockpit. So obviously, straight away, that will take out a certain percentage of people that are smaller. You've then got, I even met somebody in the last couple of years who actually thought she couldn't have a family and fly as well. So, with that sort of mindset, I don't know, that perception of I can't have a family and I can do that job. So I know a lot of women that do come through maybe go off and do different things. So they might go off and do multi-engine aircraft, or they might go off and do rotary flying, but they won't go off into the fast jet stream because it takes longer to qualify. And obviously on the front line, you could be off and away doing a lot of ops, so they maybe think that might not work with their family. Yeah. So, and then there's this generational thing as well. When I was a kid, I would see all these aircraft flying around all the time, and it would be quite a presence. Whereas now, there's lots of documentaries out there, but I don't know. I think there's so many other things to do, isn't there? So there's so many different reasons, I think, for that happening.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You've taken G-force in a Hawk, managing air sickness, flown 8 to 9 hour sorties, refuelling mid-air, and patrolled over the Falkland Islands. You've had to master the body and the brain under pressure. What does great instruction look like at speed at 310 knots and 360 miles per hour? And can you tell me about timely intervention?
So when I'm instructing, I'm sat in a tandem cockpit. So I'm sat behind the students. So if you're teaching in a classroom, you've got that interaction. You can see people's expressions. You can got all that body language. I don't have that. I've just got a back of somebody's head with an injection seat head box in front of me. So the thing that I'm looking at firstly is safety. So I'm making sure that the aircraft is being flown safely. So I'm watching the trajectory of it. So there's a lot of multitasking going on. So I'm looking where the aircraft's going. We've got a lot of instrumentation, so I'm looking at what that instrumentation is telling me to make sure that that's being done safely. And then I'm monitoring what that instructor's doing as well, the student's doing. So looking at where the head is moving. And then the way that I'm communicating with them is really important, because if there's a slight misunderstanding, obviously that could, at about 300 miles an hour, could be pretty critical. So making sure, and we get trained in this, is in how we actually speak to somebody, and making sure that we're very clear and concise with our instructions. When it regards to timely intervention, if you're flying at 300 miles an hour at 300 foot above the ground, then obviously things can build up and go wrong pretty quickly. So again, through training and expertise, you've just got to make sure that your hands are on close to the controls. So if something does go wrong, you're there to take them straight away. And then depending on the proximity to the ground generally, or proximity to another aircraft, because we could be in close formation as well, very close to another aircraft, then will dictate how much leeway I can give somebody. So if it's just on their own, then I could probably give them a bit more leeway, particularly if I put 10,000 feet, they can make mistakes and it's not going to have a massive impact. But obviously, timely intervention is particularly important close to the ground or close to another aircraft. So that's my job, and I've got dual controls in the back to do that if the student in the front is making that mistake.
Wow, thank you so much. Amanda, follow that.
Well, I can't really, can I? I mean, when Zoe said I was coming on after Mitch, I was like, thanks a lot. That's great.
You're going to be great. As a child in Manchester, you started challenging the rules, fighting to join the Scouts and swapping needlework for woodwork, with the driver being for fairness always. Where did that need for fairness come from, and does that still drive you today, and in what form?
It does still drive me. Where it came from, I don't really know. Because when I did my first little, this is unfair, what's going on, I was 4. So just hearing about there only being one pilot, female, I was just like, no. You know, my heckles go up. So I don't know where it came from. I think it just doesn't seem logical or rational. You know, at the age of 4, why was I being told I couldn't go camping? I couldn't go in tents. I couldn't do all the crafts that the boys could do. I couldn't climb trees because I was a girl. Why is that rational? It's not. So I think that's where it came from. And it's been a blessing and a curse ever since.
Does it still drive you today, do you think?
Yes. Although I think my quest is not driven it's not driven by equality. It's driven by fairness, and it just isn't logical, and that's what drives me insane. So people may perceive it that it's sort of equality driven in terms of sexual equality, but gender equality, but it's not. It's just general equality. Okay. So yes, it very much still drives me, but I've learned to curb it where necessary.
Your family's bankruptcy when you were 7, hardwired a never lose the house mindset, didn't it? How has that shaped your career, and what risk framework would you hand to business founders?
I think it's shaped my career by, when I look back now, I haven't taken the risks that I wished I had taken. And I think we touched on it earlier by saying, you know, go with your gut, go with your passion, your feeling. I think because I learned at such a young age that security wasn't given. You know, it didn't just come to you. I think because of that, I haven't gone after things that in my gut I felt that I should go after. And I've made decisions based on that. And, you know, they've worked out. You know, it hasn't been disastrous at all. But I do think it was driven by security, by safety. Even though there were still risky decisions, there was still the safer option.
Well, you had your own business for a long time. I mean, it's not exactly the safe option.
No, I know. But it is something I regret. And so just hearing other people talking about go with your gut instinct, that's absolutely, you know, you have all these things talking to you in your head and people telling you not to do anything and the risks and all associated with it. And I think, and Lauren mentioned it earlier, and I would definitely say just go with what you feel, because if you're passionate and you believe in it, nothing is stronger than that, I think.
So an unexpected hysterectomy at 43 rewrote your timeline. What do you wish workplaces and friends had said or done sooner around fertility and career momentum?
I don't think it was the workplace or my friends, really. I think it was. I wished I'd done it differently. I wish I'd thought about time. I wish I'd realised that I wasn't Peter Pan and I was getting older. And there was a biological clock ticking. And so everybody around me was just having a fabulous time and a lot of fun, and I just wasn't aware of getting older. So I really don't think it was the workplace or it was friends. I think it was me just having a sort of being blind to the reality of life ticking by. And so, again, you know, if I was looking back, I would just say, be aware of what's going on around you. Because time does tick by very, very quickly. And there's things that keep coming back to what we've been saying. And it's that, you know, go with your passion, go with your feel. It all falls into the same place. That you have to be aware of time before it disappears, because you just don't know what's around the corner.
So menopause, COVID, and an adult ADHD diagnosis arrived all at the same time.
It was the perfect storm.
Resulting in burnouts. How did you come back from that burnout?
Well, the burnout came first.
Okay, burnout.
So the burnout happened. And then, because I burnt out, I was literally lying down for 6 weeks, not able to move. And it came out of nowhere. I mean, suppose if you look and you sort of analyse my life in the sort of previous 2 years, it didn't come out of nowhere, but it felt as though it came out of nowhere. And I had to lie down for 6 weeks because my body literally just said, no more now, because I would always power through. I would always, you know, oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden my body just went, no, you're not fine. You're going to lie down. And so I literally had to stop, and I had no choice in it. So it was not a choice. It was something I had to tolerate. And it's not the type of person that I am to just go, okay, you have to lie down for 6 weeks, but I physically couldn't do anything else. And I had to completely change my life. But again, I don't believe that this was a sort of conscious thing to do, because my body just didn't let me do it.
So, and then we had menopause and COVID and ADHD. Can you just tell me a bit about the ADHD? Because that's quite interesting.
So COVID happened, but this also helped me get over the burnout.
Yeah.
Because the burnout was all through 2019, then COVID happened. So we went into lockdown, and that meant I couldn't do all of the stuff I normally would do.
Yeah.
So that helped, ironically, COVID helped me recover from burnout. But at the same time, because during COVID, I think this happened to an awful lot of people, which is why ADHD diagnosis is through the roof now, post-COVID. Everybody's natural coping strategies that they had during COVID disappeared. So all the crazy stuff that I used to do every single day and didn't realise why I was doing it, it went. And I was just like this caged lion. And my partner then, at the time, she just turned around to me and said, do you think you might have ADHD? And I was like, don't be ridiculous, as I'm jumping about everywhere, going insane. Don't be ridiculous. And started reading about it. And then I was just like, oh my God, this is my life. It was, oh.
So that leads nicely on to my next question. So you left your own company after 17 years because boredom is kryptonite, your words, not mine, and found yourself leading reluctantly by reframing leadership as helping. What is it about the word leadership that you don't like?
I think this comes back to the time when I grew up, and, you know, I was a kid in the 70s, and all the leaders that you saw were very bombastic, usually male. I want to swear, I'm not going to, but, you know, full of BS. And I just associated leadership with these hideous men, and that were just sort of imposing and not helping and not nurturing. It goes back to you can't be a scout. You know, why can I not be a scout? I'm told by all of these powers that be that I can't do this. So my vision of leadership was associated with all of that.
Okay.
So I've never, ever related to that. And I think this is why it's so good with women in the workplace now, because we're approaching things differently. You mentioned earlier about dealing with grief in the workplace. Men wouldn't think of that. Not being a downer on men, but women, they approach things so differently. There is a natural nurturing aspect to them that just doesn't come across in other ways. Okay. So I think if you can be a leader through nurturing and helping and spotting talent and seeing something in someone that you think, my God, this person's incredible, I'm going to help pull that out.
Yeah.
And you can just help them along their way, then that to me is leadership, but not as I saw it.
Yeah, so you've reframed it.
Yeah.
Love it. You've mentioned to me that you were incredibly nervous about doing the podcast when we recorded Abbey Road last April. What has been the effect of the podcast on you?
Well, it got me out of my comfort zone. You know, I've spent years always with someone else being a front man because I've never particularly enjoyed it because I get so nervous. And when you asked me to do this, I just thought, right, I've got to stop this now.
I just kept pestering you to.
And you kept pestering me. And you were very kind and you were very lovely and very nurturing. You led me in a nurturing way. And I just thought, you know what, I need to do this. I need to do this for my own sort of sanity and prove that I can do it. And it's actually helped.
Good.
Because I've done various things subsequently that I thought that I would feel incredibly nervous about, and I haven't.
Amazing.
Yeah, so thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Has anybody got any questions for Mitch or Amanda?
And I won't be offended if they're all for Mitch.
Yeah. Oh, here's Josh.
Hello, I've actually got one for Amanda. You talked about you've learnt when to curb it. When do you have to curb it?
I have to curb it quite a lot, it would seem. And my little inner voice is going, don't say that. Don't say that. I didn't curb it a lot when I was younger, and I do think that my career has impacted because of that. Now, I do rephrase things and hold back from how I would say them previously. And a lot of that is due to the fact that I actually work for someone else now. so I have to. But I think I was young, impulsive, foolish, believed in transparency and honesty. I still do. But I've also now learned that that doesn't always get you to where you need to get to, unfortunately. And I do think it's changing, especially with women. It's still changing very, very slowly. But it is changing. So I would say that I'm more wise with my shooting my mouth off now.
Any other questions?
Hi, I've got a question for Mitch. Mitch, if you could choose any aeroplane to fly, what would it be through history?
Oh, wow. I'd love to fly the Spitfire, just because of its status and its history. And then, I suppose, future-wise, I mean, I've still got potentially over 10 years of flying in me. I can get to the age of 65, and that's it for me for military flying. So if there was an opportunity to fly a Typhoon or a Lightning, that would be absolutely amazing. But I'm getting to a point where my body might start to struggle with it a bit. But I'm keeping going at the moment. But those are the sort of the three ones that I would love to have a flight in. Yeah.
There's another question down here.
Hi, my question's for Amanda. I resonated quite a lot with things that you were saying, and I was just interested to know if you've ever started to veer towards speaking and going about ways in more of a masculine way to fit in.
No, I don't think I have. I think I've been slightly naturally more masculine than a lot of other women. I've never really changed who I am or how I am in order to fit in, because I've never believed I should. And I think just having that attitude in a man's world, which essentially in the property industry is, I do think that has helped. And if they haven't liked it, so be it.
I've seen that though, where you have got to be yourself, haven't you? And otherwise, I've seen people that are drinking with the guys under the table with a cigar type thing, and they're changing their own character to try and fit in, and I don't think that's right. I think they should just be able to be themselves. So.
I mean, I also went to a boys' school, so when I was at school, I was one of 45 girls, and there was 600 boys because it had just gone co-educational. So I was surrounded by boys predominantly from a very, very young age, and so I naturally fitted in. Lots of other girls there had an absolute hell of a time and hated it, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And I think that just set me up for sort of being very much in a man's world. But I've never, ever sort of fawned or become anything other than I am in order to fit in.
Phoebe had a question.
This is for Amanda as well. You say you're challenging the Scouts kind of gender norms at 4. That's obviously very young before school. What was your the gender discussion like with your parents at that time? Was it something that they kind of born into you as that you should challenge it, or is it like an independent mindset from your parents?
I think it was fairly independent, but my mother was actually quite accepting and soon cottoned on, because she then realised that if she threatened me with ballet lessons, I'd be very well behaved. So that became the norm. But that she was very, very open-minded. So my 4th birthday, I got a pair of football boots. That was unheard of. I also got an Action Man. That was unheard of. So she was very, very open-minded to how I wanted to be, and I always dressed up in cowboy uniforms and pilots, and also, and she just went along with it the entire time. So it was very, very open, but it wasn't because it was encouraged. It wasn't discouraged. It was just how I was.
Okay, guys, rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Amanda, starting with you. Leadership books, fluff or life-changing?
Both.
Don't do this to me. Come on. Pick a side.
Life-changing.
Great. Mitch, mentorship, game changer or overrated?
Could be a game changer.
Networking events, essential or total waste of time?
Essential.
Imposter syndrome, real problem or convenient label?
Real problem.
Work-life balance, possible or a complete myth?
Myth.
Follow your passion, best advice or biggest lie?
Best advice, yeah.
Perfectionism, secret weapon or self-sabotage?
Oh, that's a good one.
That is, yeah.
Secret weapon.
Public speaking, essential skill or optional extra?
Optional extra. I think you could get away with it. You can get away without
Maybe in
it.
your job.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to Mitch and Amanda. Thank you, guys. You can say that. Thank you. So that's it. I hope that tonight has inspired you, or that at the very least made you realise that no one's path is straightforward. I wasn't expecting to hear about some of the things we've heard about tonight, so thank you. Thank yous to Claire and the WSP team for hosting us so beautifully tonight. Storm Events, Michael, Dave, Alice and the wider team. Thank you for the fantastic signage, the video, the staging, recording. Nothing has been too much trouble. Thank you. Anita and Laura, my team, who are the brains, the creative and the organisation behind this evening, and Places She Shapes. They do a great job of humouring my ridiculous ideas. Nick, Spencer and the JC team, thank you, and the wider Places She Shapes team in Canada. I've been told I need to do what is called a call to action. So if you know what that is, let me know. So if it feels appropriate, please tell a friend, get involved with the show. We're always looking for sponsors or recommend an inspiring woman in your life, and let's continue to share these stories. Thank you all so much for coming tonight and being part of our first live recording. Please stay for a drink, chat to my amazing podcast guests, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you both.